Hi there, I'm Kathleen Jasper, and today I'm going to be talking about some of the concepts you might see on any social studies exam, whether it's an elementary ed social studies certification exam, middle school or high school social studies certification exam. They all kind of test the same things, and they definitely cover early European exploration of the Americas. So we're going to talk about that today. Now, this might be in the world history section of the social studies exam, or it could be in the U.S. history of the social studies exam, because early European exploration obviously led to the development of the United States. So you might see it in either one of those content categories. So let's get started. Now, every social science certification exams for teaching is going to have some component of U.S. history, world history, geography, and economics. Every single certification exam will have that. And that is because in the United States, we want our teachers to have a general understanding of those particular areas. Now, as you move up in the grades, if you're trying to become a high school social studies teacher, you might get even more specific. For example, under the world history portion, it might talk about European history, it might talk about the Protestant Reformation, more specific things like that. But overall, you're always going to have some component of U.S. history, world history, geography, and economics. Today in this video, we're going to hit U.S. history and world history when we talk about European exploration. Because European exploration is not just about, Spain, Britain, and France and the world, but it's also about early U.S. history. This is how the Americas were founded, and this is how the United States was formed. All right, so the easy way to talk about this is by looking at a map of the world and kind of understanding why people would get on ships and trek it across the Atlantic to what will become the United States of America. So basically, let's just take a look at this map right here. Right here is Europe, okay? And basically, there are a bunch of people, bunch of kingdoms and civilizations over here. And these people like to trade over here in India and in China, in this area here in Asia. There's spices there's other goods. These Europeans over here, they like to bring their goods and trade with the people over here, and they like to buy and sell and all of that. And that's going on, in the early days. So I'm going to jump to about 1300s to 1400s, okay? So these guys over here in Europe, they are going over here to India, going over here to China, going over here to Asia, and trading their goods and picking up goods. But in order to do that, they have to cut through this area here in the Middle East. And that can be problematic because when they cut through that kind of backyard, they get taxed. So it's kind of like the people in the Middle East are like, hey, I see you cutting through my backyard. You owe me money. If you want to use my backyard as one of your trade routes, you're going to give me a piece of the pie. And so this becomes, kind of taxing for the European explorers and those who want to trade their goods. And not to mention that what's happening over in this area of the world in the Middle East, this is mainly Islamic here. So you've got Islam here in the Middle East. And over here in Europe, you have Christianity. I'll just put a cross there. And those two religions are not really jiving that well at this time. And the Crusades are happening. And so there's a lot of religious tension. Surprise, surprise. And there are obvious, collisions because of that. There's war, there's killing, there's murdering, all of that. And then, of course, the money piece. The people who live in the Middle East, these Islamic people, they're charging a tax, rightfully so, of the Europeans who are cutting through their backyard in order to get to this area and this area here to trade. So the people in Europe here decide, you know what? What if we go west to go east? Meaning, what if we go this way to go out the other side of the earth, basically, and hit the east? So they knew it was going to be a much longer trek to go west in order to end up east. But they were willing to take that chance because they thought it would save them money and men and supplies and all of that. So they decided, you know what, we're going to get on our boats and we're going to go west to go east. And because they're hoping that basically they'll go this way and pop out the other end over here, and they'd be able to trade with China, go down here on their ships and trade with India, and avoid this whole area right here and just cut out that situation. Now, some of the first early European explorers to do this was Spain, the Spanish. They were the first to do it. So Spain, and I'm going to do a little kind of sliver here of Portugal. That's not completely geographically correct because I'm using like a crayon. But Portugal is that little country on the side of Spain, that little sliver. And basically Spain is the first one to head over to the New World or the Americas. Now they're trying to go west to go east, and Spain has already been here in Africa for quite some time. They've been colonizing, they've been gobbling up resources. They've also been grabbing people from this land and enslaving them and putting them on boats and trading them up and down. So this is a situation that's going on in Africa already. And so Spain says, you know what? We're going to go down here to Africa. We're going to get some supplies, and then we're going to head over to the New World, which they don't know really yet that it's the New World, but I'm going to head over here. I'm going to go west to go east. And when they do, they end up hitting the Americas here and down in here and all down in here. They start exploring this area here. Now, this is the Spanish. Purple is Spanish, okay? So they start to kind of colonize this area and start to kind of conquer this area and say, this is our area. We're the Spanish. We came over here. We discovered it. It's ours. Now, there were already people here. Of course, there were Native Americans in both North America, Central America, and South America. But Spain brought with it slaves to build up this area of the world. And they also brought disease, which helped them to defeat the Native Americans, because the Native Americans were actually really good warriors, and their bows and arrows would outshoot muskets and all that. They had to reload the muskets and do all that stuff. And so they were warriors. They could have fought them off, but the Europeans start bringing over disease, which starts to decimate the Native American population. So they basically had disease on their side because it helped to reduce the numbers of Native Americans that they had to fight in order to conquer this land. So Spain and Portugal are the first to do it. They go down here to Africa. They pillage that area, grab slaves, take people from their homes, put them on boats, and head over here to the New World. And they do this, over and over again for a while. Spain comes down here to Africa, grabs slaves, goes over here to the New World, goes back up here to Spain, down to Africa, over to the New World, to Spain, and they do this over and over and over again. Now, France sees this happening, and France is like, okay, so this is France here. I see what Spain is doing. I want to do that too. I want to skip out on this trek here. I don't want to go across the Middle East. I want to go where Spain is going. Looks like they found some really good stuff over there. So I'm going to do the same thing. So they got on boats and they went down here to Africa and started to steal people, resources, and things like that from the African people. And then they put those things on boats. And then they came over here to the United States. And now France, they got this middle section of what is now the United States. They called it the New World, the Americas. It's now called the United States. Obviously, this is up in Canada as well. So they got this whole section here. So this is France. So the next country to do this is Great Britain. And so they're located up here on the island of Great Britain. And they decide to do the same thing. They come down, they grab slaves down in Africa and resources and things like that. And they come over to the New World here. And the Brits grab this part of the United States, the East Coast. Lots of ports in here where they can bring their ships and charge people for bringing in their goods. They're taking slaves from Africa and bringing them over to the New World. And then they too are coming back to Britain and then back down to Africa to grab slaves and back over to the United States, what is now the United States, dropping slaves off, dropping goods off, working for a while, then going back to Britain and down and back, over, down, until this kind of triangle starts to form with all of these countries. Notice this triangle here. And this is called the triangle slave trade. The reason why is because it looks like a triangle. Basically, the early European explorers wanted to go west in order to get east. And when they did, they stumbled along this piece of land called the Americas. There were Native American people already here living and thriving and having families and doing their thing. But the early European settlers, the early European explorers brought with them, they had weapons, but they also had disease that they brought with them that helped to wipe out all of the Native Americans. And they also brought slaves with them to start building up the land and start, making the United States the United States. So that is the basic way in which early Europeans came over to the Americas. So it's really, really important that you understand that when you're answering world history questions and when you're answering American history questions. Obviously, it has to do with world history because you're talking about Spain, you're talking about France, and you're talking about Britain. You're also talking about Africa and the continent of Africa and how that country was ripped apart, and slaves were taken from this area, and natural resources and everything that these guys could take, they took with them over to the New World. So that's going to be the world history. And then the U.S. history, the American history, this is the early part of America. And you can see here, we've got Britain on the coast of the United States, we've got France more inland, and we have Spain down in Florida, Central and South America. And that's kind of the early days of European exploration of the Americas. Now, one thing I want to make sure that we understand about this trek and the triangular slave trade. This is not just, they picked up some people and brought them over to the New World. It's very important that you understand what happened to the continent of Africa at this time. When these European explorers and colonists came down to Africa and took these people from the continent, from their families, from their land, and sold them like goods, like you would peanut butter or, cattle or anything like that. They began something that became pervasive for 400 years. This triangular slave trade here, back and forth, happened for over 400 years before the Emancipation Proclamation. So the United States does not get built without slavery, period. Number one, you cannot build a nation as quickly as these Europeans did without the use of free labor. So basically, they took all of the able-bodied people from Africa, stripped that continent and those countries within Africa of their most able-bodied people, their best people, and took them and stole them and brought them over across the Atlantic to a strange land and used them there as slaves and never paid them for any of the work that they did and put them in conditions that were just horrific. And so make sure we understand, especially when we're teaching this part of American history and world history, that we remember that none of this happens without slaves. The United States does not get built. The farms in the South do not get built. The industry in the North does not happen without the triangular slave trade. So it's very, very important that we remember that part of the history. A lot of times, if you go online to look for this kind of history, there's a lot of American exceptionalism, which is okay. It is very exceptional that America was built in such a short period of time. But what is left out a lot of times is the fact that it was built on the backs of slaves. And a lot of this is difficult history to hear. And so people tend to leave it out because it's not as nice as, a bunch of entrepreneurs and explorers came over and built a new land. But really what happened was they came down into Africa, stole people from their land, brought them to the United States, and with that brought disease that decimated the native people who were there already in the United States. So the Europeans had two things going for them. They had slavery and they also had disease. And those two things allowed the European explorers to dominate this part of the world and build the country that now became the United States. Now later, the French would sell this piece here to the Brits or to the colonists during the Louisiana Purchase. And so that would become, the colonists now that would own that. And the British or the colonists would move westward across the United States and conquer all that area there. And so that all happens later. But early on, this is how it went. The Spanish got the southern part of the United States, Central America and South America. The French got that middle quadrant of the United States and up into Canada. And then the British got that East Coast portion of what is now the United States. So hopefully that clears things up for you when it comes to American and world history. Remember, let's not forget key pieces of history when teaching this to our students. And make sure you remember this when answering questions on any social science certification exam. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hopefully that clears things up for you regarding some European early exploration. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the notifications button so you get notified when we upload new content. Thank you so much for watching today and have an awesome day.